Welcome to session 3 of Leviticus and the study in Leviticus. I hope you've done your prior reading from the second session, which is to read Leviticus 1 again, but this time looking out for any repetitions in the chapter. And I'm sure you would have realised that reading it again, you would have seen a rhythm, a natural rhythm of the whole chapter. It starts with the offering of, if the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, a male without defect, it's a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, a male without defect, it's a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma to the Lord. And it goes through the whole chapter, that repetition, that rhythm, that beat. And it's interesting that this rhythm appears at the beginning of this book, especially if you read it alongside Genesis 1. And God said, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. And he saw that it was good. It was morning and evening the third day. And so it goes on, a rhythm, a beat. And I don't think it's a mistake, or it's just accidental, that rhythm at the start of Genesis is echoed at the start of the book, where it starts to outline our guide to worship. Could it be suggesting that the rhythm here of worship and offering has a fundamental link to creation, to the start of the world? The start of the world has a rhythm, has a beat to it, in the same way our worship has a rhythm, has a beat to it. I don't think that's a complete and utter blind alley to go looking up at and study more and read more. What has this rhythm got to do? So in your own time, look at that. So here we are, verse 3. If the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you are to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting, so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. And so we come to the whole concept, this big picture idea of sacrifice being a cornerstone of worship. And the Hebrew word is carbonot, which literally means, if you just take it as a singular translation, it means sacrifice or offering. But as with most of these things in Hebrew, which is a word-light language, there's more going on. And if you kind of rub the surface like you've got a piece of wood with grain on it, if you sand it more, you find more of a meaning that adds to it, that brings something more to it than just a one-word translation of sacrifice or offering. There's an inference of, within a wider, deeper definition, there's an idea of loss, or giving up of something in the fuller translation. If we look at the root word from which carbonate comes from, it also means to draw near. So we have the word for sacrifice, this big picture, which just means sacrifice or offering. But if we look at the root of the word, it means to draw near. So the ultimate focus of our sacrifice, of our worship, is to give up something and to draw near. Interesting echoes if you fast forward into the New Testament, James chapter 4 verse 8, come near to God and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. But that first bit of that verse, come near to God and he will come near to you. So the focus, the purpose of sacrifice, worship, is to give up something and to draw near. So, to the first offering within a sacrifice is a burnt offering. Verse 3, Hebrew word in this case is olah, to ascend or to return. If you ever kind of do some study into the modern day state of Israel, they have a thing called aliyah, this idea that Jews who have the right to return to Israel. Same root word, olah, to ascend or to return. It's the most common and oldest sacrifice and represents submission to God's will. First mention of which we get, again, kind of within any kind of Old Testament study, always put the work in of, wait a minute, when was this first mentioned? And so if you get the idea of, if you're reading about a covenant later on in the Old Testament, do the work, find out where it was first mentioned, see if that it's a bigger picture, more full colour picture for helping understand the verse later on in the book. So the first mention we find of olah, of sacrifices, in Genesis 8. Post-flood situation, Noah just got off the boat. If you read the second one as a whole and don't get distracted by the chapter breaks, that's a story for another time, we find another interesting link to the creation story. So Genesis 8. Genesis 8. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed them as burnt offerings. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma. Now, we'll look at that later. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. Creation story, the job, the role of humanity, of Adam and Eve, was to be fruitful and increase in number. Could the Noah story have some semblance of creation around it? Again, maybe some study for another time. But the idea of an olah, a burnt offering, was a signal to God that his worshippers desired to bring their needs to his attention. The olah is used in biblical narratives to prompt a response from God. Study for your own time. 1 Kings 8, Numbers 23, Genesis 8 that we've already looked at. We follow up in chapter 9 and 8. God's response to the olah, the burnt offering that Noah did, was to establish the establishment of a covenant. Let's look later on. Leviticus 1 verse 3. You are to offer a male without defect. Now, there's an obvious funny line here about finding a male without defect of any kind of species. That would be quite a feat in itself, but we'll just draw a veil over that. Serious point is that male cattle were worth more than female. And God doesn't want something that's just a second thought, that's it's an easy decision to make. It'd be easy to fob off God with a female cow, loads of them, but I tell you what, how about give him the one with the duff leg? That's been called, it won't get much at market, will it? It's got a bad leg. Or the one that's nearly dead, it's got a bit diseased. Give that as a sacrifice. Inbuilt into the sacrificial system of worship is a sad reality that when we come to worship, our fallen nature kicks in and we try and find a way around a high expectation of what worship is and what God expects. We rush in without any consideration of the awe, the expectation and the reverence that God expects. If you do a simple search on the internet for the steps going up to to the temple in Jerusalem that have been excavated recently, you'll see pictures of these steps. Not one of them is the same width or height as you walk up to the temple entrance. All of them different. They go in different spaces, different heights, widths, everything. Now we could say shoddy workmen or shoddy workwomen, these people when they built the temple. Or we could look at the idea behind it. This idea that there's different depth and different width, there's something in it. And it was built in that way. So when worshippers came into the presence of God, came into the temple, they didn't do it without any. The steps were so uneven that you couldn't rush up to the presence of God. You had to take your time, or else you'd trip up, because these blooming steps were a pain. You had to take your time. You had to think about it. You couldn't just consider about coming into worship and thinking, did I turn the central heating off? Did I put the meat on for the meal at the end of this? You had to consider what you were doing as you all went up to worship. Thing is, when we worship, what distracts us from doing that? What prevents us from drawing closer to God? And how do we know if what we're offering God is actually not our best? It is actually our second best. And what steps can we put in place to get closer to God in worship? So we're back. Let's finish with the blessing. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and turn their pain to joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in the world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. Amen. Reading for next time, Hosea chapter 14, and ask yourself, what does verse 2 mean? that they might offer the fruit of their lips. Well, how does this answer, or how does the answer sit in our looking at worship? Hosea chapter 14, read it, particularly verse 2. What does it mean? A bit of a hint. It's about the context, and also look at different translations of that chapter in different Bibles. See you next time.